All right, welcome everybody. I'm Mary Ellen Slayter, and I'm going to be your moderator today. And I am here with our awesome panel. We're going to be talking about technical debt. Every time we do surveys where we ask folks, senior tech leaders, what is their most pressing challenge? What is stressing them out the most? Tech debt has consistently been in the top 3 responses in every single survey that I have come across, in the last 5 years. It seems like it is just a persistent thing. It causes a lot of anxiety. People don't know quite what to make of it. They know that they should be doing something or not, but it just kind of hangs around, I feel like, all the time. And I've got this lovely panel here assembled. We are going to talk about what you actually can do about it, besides just being stressed about it. So first, I'm going to introduce myself briefly. My name is, like I said, Mary Ellen. I'm the CEO of RepCap. I'm a content marketer, former journalist, working in business and technology at the intersection of this. So this is also something that I've been thinking about for a long time. So I'm excited to be able to come in and sort of jump in and moderate this discussion. We're going to talk about, first of all, how to turn your technical debt into a catalyst for growth. And I think Josh, I know, has some really sort of reassuring things to say about this. It makes you feel not quite so bad about your technical debt. What you can do to get ahead of it by using technology, right? It's like AI is a double-edged sword when it comes to tech debt, which I know we're going to dig into here a little bit. And then last but not least, what are some ways that you can get ahead of it and even prevent it? What can we be doing to sort of future-proof the development? What decisions can we make now to not get in that stressed out spot again? So first, let's jump on through. We're going to make some introductions here very briefly, but if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat and we will answer them. I'll get to them as we can. So, all right, let's do introductions. I believe, my slide. Cheryl, you're up.
That's me. Hi. Thanks so much for having me here. I love this topic. So my name is Cheryl and I'm Chief Product and Technology Officer at Betterworks. Been here for a little over 2 years, based in San Francisco. But I have a long history, started life as an engineer and have been building and leading product and engineering teams for a couple of decades. I've worked at some big companies like Amazon and Salesforce and a lot of startups, mostly in kind of the business to business space, large enterprise, that kind of thing. And yeah, tech debt's been a part of that all along. So excited to talk about this.
Well, tell us a little bit about Betterworks right quick. What does Betterworks do?
Oh, absolutely. So Betterworks is enterprise performance management. It's modern, intuitive, intelligent, continuous. So really thinking about how do we, revolutionize that process for managers and employees to really supercharge, your organization. So we're all about making that often maligned process of performance reviews, really easy and efficient and effective and continuous. So that's what we do.
Do you have, is any of your OKRs include technical debt?
Absolutely. We have a big one right now. Right. Later. I'm excited to talk about it.
Right. Forever, right? Forever and ever. All right. Next up, Josh, coming in from Australia today. Tell us a little bit about you and about what you do these days.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Mary Ellen. And it's great to be here with Cheryl and Douglas as well. As you said, I'm coming in from Melbourne, Australia. I'm the CTO at Team, and this is my 17th year of this. So that I'd say I've been in small companies and big companies, but it was kind of the same thing because, when we started, it was just a very seed of an idea, and then it's grown and evolved through many iterations during that time. And, so the kind of complexity problems that have come up during that time have been, a great learning experience to where we are now. And just keep learning new things and addressing new challenges as they come up.
And then tell us just a little bit about what X-Team does.
Sure. So what X-Team does really well is finding great developers wherever they are in the world, and then creating an environment where they can be supported to join a team of one of our clients, and contribute to whatever problems they're solving, and so it's really finding the right people to join our clients' teams. And bring in new expertise or add to the expertise that's already there. But kind of, creating that community and that environment where these people from all around the world can work really effectively distributed.
Cool. Yet I bet not only do you have to deal with your own tech debt, you're dealing with helping other people figure out how to solve theirs. All right. And then Douglas, what about you? You've got an interesting background. I feel like you've had your hand in lots of startups too. And like you've also thinking about lots of people's tech debt over the years.
Lots of startups and lots of larger companies as well. So I'm a technologist and a consultant. So that means I've worked with about 300 different organizations around the world, including Australia. I was just doing an Australian mining company recently. That was a lot of fun to figure out them. And guess what? They had lots of legacy code and tech debt. Those are different things. So very interested in helping technology teams become insanely profitable. And one of the biggest problems is communicating about things like tech debt. I think we've come up with a name that's confusing us engineers, and we need to help people be less confused about its value and when it's useful and when it's not. And we don't do a very good job of that. So I'd love to help start solving that today.
Well, then that is where we are going to start, because I think that's a similar conversation that you and I have had before too, Josh. So like start with this definition where why are we thinking about this wrong, Douglas? What is tech debt? What is legacy code? Why are we mixing them up? Like,
which of us do you want to go? You said Josh. And
I said Douglas. So I said Josh.
No harm done. I heard Josh, and so I didn't want to step on Josh.
Okay. So no. It's early for Josh. Let him wake up. Like you go.
That's true. I hope you had plenty of coffee, Josh. So technical debt for me is exactly the same as a mortgage. And mortgages are good, right? We like having mortgages. If you're a CFO and you look at the balance sheet of a company and it has no debt, you're probably kind of worried about that company. That company is not leveraging enough. It's not working hard enough to make its assets perform for it. In the same way, if you have no technical debt, you aren't doing enough experimentation. You aren't trying enough stuff. So I really worry about companies that have such a lid on their technical debt that their engineers never complain about it, that they never get confused, they never have a bug. Those folks, unless they're building nuclear power plants, probably should get more. Okay,
they should borrow more. All right. So I know who wants to jump in. I'll let Josh. You want to jump in on this one, or Cheryl? Who wants to add to that?
Either way, I mean, yeah, definitely. I'm wholeheartedly agreeing with you on that front, because we need to be moving fast. We need to be getting things to market quickly, and in the effort to do that, you are going to amass some amount of what might be considered technical debt, and it's always a balance, right? Because the other thing you can get into is if you ignore it, and just let it pile up, then it can kind of bite you, right? So you just
remember to pay the mortgage every month.
Yeah, exactly. I like
that.
So I like that metaphor. And then I'd love to, because one of the things I do, I'll admit I confuse, is talking about like legacy code, legacy platform, and having to kind of re-architect that. And so maybe in your metaphor, it's like you're deciding to build a new house, right? Different concepts. So this is educating me. Thank you.
I live in a legacy house. I'm not in it right now, but my house here in England, I talk funny, but I'm in England. My house here in England is 600 years old. So that's a legacy house. And guess what? It works real good, but you need to maintain it. You need to make sure to take care of it. And so the fact that there's some debt on this house and, not every beam is in perfect shape is a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of...
It's a great... Sorry, Mary Ellen.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that framing, Douglas, of, we often talk about technical debt, but we don't usually talk about taking out a technical loan. And I think it's really helpful when we do, because if your only way of talking about debt is as something that shouldn't have happened, then you're always acting reactively to it. And you're probably ignoring it until it's built up to the point where you're smothered by it. Take out a technical loan, make your monthly repayments, and now it's something that's actually working for you rather than something that you're constantly caught off guard by.
And I'll even be more radical. I said, pay your mortgage every month. I don't necessarily believe that in every case, because there are types of debt which you pay off in a balloon payment. You pay off at the end. And so, for example, I've had clients who made an acquisition, and during that acquisition, they knew they were taking on integrations and other ways of working with their new code, with what they've acquired, that they know they're going to throw away. And they know that once they've really absorbed that acquisition, the little bridge they made, the little piece that lets their bit talk to our bit, doesn't matter, because we will have subsumed them into our system. So that's okay. We can pay that off in a balloon payment at the end and turn off their system. You don't have to make the payments every month.
Yeah.
Love it.
I mean, I guess, why does that make people feel so guilty? Is it because of the word debt? Like, I mean, is there something else we should be calling it instead? Because, like, in theory, what you just sounded very strategic and very practical to me. Why would we go clean up and fix all this knowing that they're not going to keep it? And yet, do we not feel this like pressure? Should we call it something else? Like,
well, and I wonder if we have any CFOs watching us right now who would like to comment on this. Because if a CFO thinks about debt, they think about debt as a positive thing, right? Debt in a company is a way of leveraging, a way of moving faster, a way of getting more out of your assets. Why don't they do more with that? And I think they talk about debt in a positive way. At least that's how I hear CFOs discuss it. Of course, if you're going bankrupt, that's because you didn't pay off your debt. You didn't deal with your debt in an appropriate way. But debt is it's a perfectly reasonable word. I wouldn't change it. I would just use it like our finance friends use it. So if there are any CFOs who want to make a comment, I would love to hear from them.
So Josh, partly this whole webinar actually was spurred from a conversation you and I had some time ago, where you talked about how psychologically hard it is to let things go when people build things. So, like, how do we get there? Because you were talking about how you build these prototypes and you build this stuff or whatever, and it's really hard to let go. But you have a way of talking about this and about what you actually get out of those experiences that I think makes that psychologically better. But, like, why is this so hard?
Yeah, that is a big question, isn't it? And I kind of wish, that we could dig more into that, because, we had that conversation, and even then I went away from that thinking, there's so much more in there, that we could talk about. But it's so true that, you build something, you write the code, and you see the end results that you've built. And of course, if you've done well, you're going to feel attached to it. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of unconscious bias that goes into that as well. And the difficulty of letting go, of throwing something away and saying, now it's time to build the real thing is very difficult. And again, there shouldn't be shame attached to that, because it's just something that has to be approached very, as rationally as we can at the time. But, we often reflect that especially when you're at the more senior level, the real work that developers are doing is not writing the code. That's kind of the easy part that comes at the end, once you've done the work of understanding the business, understanding the problem, modeling it in a way that computers can deal with. And so once we can frame things that way, I find that helps a lot with being able to let go of code that would be a source of bad debt, and then and then use all that knowledge that you've gained to re-architect, to build something that's going to last, that's going to be a good investment. Subsequently as well, that's part of the reason why retention, staff retention is such a huge cost, $1 billion cost within the industry, because you have these people who have done the work of understanding your business, understanding how it's modeled in computer terms. You can't just keep the code and expect somebody else to step into that role, because it's all of that knowledge that's in somebody's head where the value actually lies.
Mm. It's like, it's not about the code. It's about the people who made the code. What they
code is a reflection of the understanding that's happened. Yeah.
And not just the people, because one of the crucial things is you should be downloading what's in those people's brains into your software, and you can keep that scaffolding. We keep going with the house analogy. You can keep that scaffolding around the tests and the verifications and the scripts and so on that keep that software running. That information can stay as you replace it. So I'm never a big fan, and I bet Cheryl and Josh have seen, and Mary Ellen have seen this as well. I don't want you to tear down your house and build a whole new one. That's never a good idea. It's much better to keep the scaffolding that's around, make sure that you have the definition of where your house should be, how it should be structured, how your software is going to work, and then gradually replace it while you keep that knowledge. But if you just keep the knowledge inside people's heads, then when you lose them, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's why retention costs you so much. It'd be much better to capture it when you build the debt. And then when you replace it and you build the more permanent solution, you still have what you need to keep it running.
So Cheryl, how do you think about this? Like, you're trying to decide, like, okay, this is an acceptable level of debt, or when you hit that not acceptable level and you're like, okay, we have to do something about this. Like, your process.
There's so much of what Josh was talking about that was like sparking things that I wanted to talk about. And before I get into that, because one of the things I think that's important for us to acknowledge is, so when you were saying, Josh, talking about sort of the data, like the information about the business, the what you're trying to achieve as a business, and then how do you translate that into something that computers can handle? The reality is, for a lot of us, that those inputs change over time. So that's what we're responding to right now at Betterworks is those inputs have changed. So the thing that we built 10 years ago isn't necessarily working for the business we're trying to do now, right? So that creates, like, all of a sudden you have all this, whatever you want to call it, debt or something. We essentially, we have to kind of redesign the house, if you will, a bit to meet the needs, right, of the business now. But getting back to your question, Mary Ellen, and an earlier point of where has tech debt gotten its kind of negative connotation, is I do think that there is that kind of traditional, like, just you have your code base, you're adding features, right? You're responding to requests, you're adding, all kinds of functionality, and you're trying to move fast, and in the back of your head, you're amassing this debt, but you're like, later. And maybe you don't have any process in place to pay that down, right, on a monthly basis or whatever your horizon is. And then all of a sudden it becomes so massive that you have things like, every time you do a release, there's bugs all over the place and you have angry customers. Mm-hmm. Anytime you try to build, right, it takes hours to build. You go and make a change here in your platform and it breaks a thing like way over here, right? Like that. Like all of these, what people call smells, are indicators that you've let it go too far. And if you let it go too far, then that can be, one of the big companies I worked for literally was in that situation where we were just hyper growth mode and building and adding and not paying down debt. And then all of a sudden we get to that point. So we took it was like almost half a year, a little less than half a year, 4 months, no new features, no new innovation. No, it was all dealing with tech debt. That was tough. Right. And that is, like, customers don't love that when you do that. So that can be kind of the result. And I think that's some of where the negative connotations come from, is because folks maybe haven't been handling it in the best way possible. But I do think if you're thinking about it with the right framing and handling your debt appropriately, then it doesn't become such a negative for the business. It's an accelerator. It helps you, like, keep moving quickly and be nimble. But you have to make sure you're taking care of it.
So now I need technical cash flow, apparently. It's like, that's what you're really describing. It's like, where's because we're doing about technical debt report. It's like, no, I need my statement of cash flows equivalent for technical debt now. Like, that's my, I wonder what that would look like. We should page in Sarah, the CFO at Thanks, Tame.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why it's so tricky. it was mentioned before, we've got a lot to learn from our friends in finance, and I absolutely agree. We can learn so much. That they have something that we don't have, which is nice numbers in a well-ordered sheet that tells them exactly how much interest they're paying. We don't often have that. Like, it's part of the reason it's so tricky is because there is such a large subjective. It can be subjective element to it, and it's kind of like, well, it feels like I'm paying a whole chunk of interest on this thing, but and maybe that's the case, or maybe there's something else going on. So yeah, I think one of the big things that we can do that will help towards this is finding ways to measure and to kind of formalize how we write our cash flow statement. And how do you take those soundings to tell, all right, it really feels like this is the strategic moment to do something about this versus capitalize on the loan that we've taken.
It always reminds me, I was going through something, I was thinking about there's an old Donald Rumsfeld quote where he talked about there's known knowns and you've got your unknown knowns and your known unknowns and you got your unknown unknowns. And I feel like for a lot of tech leaders, the tech debt questions mostly fall into unknown unknowns, which are things we don't understand and we are not aware of. Those are the scariest things like that. But there's a way, I think we could, I guess this is sort of moving into the kind of part of our conversation. How do we take them from being unknown unknowns to becoming at least known knowns, if not known unknowns? Like, Douglas, when you encounter this with clients, like, what do you do? Like, how do you help them get a handle on this?
Well, the first thing I do is change the language. So we've been defining words here in a very helpful way. And I want to draw this strong distinction between technical debt and legacy code. Legacy code has a very simple definition. If you go look it up, it's code without tests. It's code that I can't change without feeling nervous and scared that I'm going to do exactly what Cheryl is describing. You change it here and you break it there and there are bugs all over the place and I can't release. That's legacy code. Technical debt could be in code that's legacy and I don't understand it, therefore I can't change it, therefore I borrowed something and I've harmed myself, I have to pay it down. But it can also be in code that is well tested, well understood. I know what shortcuts I took. I understand what the risks are and what the changes are, and that's much more controlled. And so when I go in and I change people's language that way, it gets us engineers to stop confusing people. Because one of the great things that engineers are really good at is taking something that actually is a bit better defined than we're letting on. And so it's very subjective. I just don't like this code. It's very difficult. It's hard to work with and I'm annoyed and I'm going to quit if you make me keep working with this code. We like keeping it vague and unclear for you. I come in and I say, we're going to give this a strong definition. We're going to say, if we have tests for it, if we can update it and we can change it, even if we know it takes us twice as long as the rest of the code, that's tech debt. It's not legacy code. And when you can draw that distinction, you can check it much more easily. You can actually check your cash flow and say, well, look, I'm able to get this part of the software to give business value, and I can measure that business value. I can produce features. I know that we made more sales because of that. Now, it takes me twice as long to do that. Do I want to then make this a better asset, a faster asset, a more valuable asset? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm happy with it as it is, but I have it under control. The legacy code is the danger. It's the part that you just don't understand. That's the real unknown.
All right, I'm dropping the Rumsfeld matrix in the chat over here for anybody who isn't familiar with this. I always liked, because I found myself one of those over the years, like, this is my DC journalist life coming back, because I always think, is that a known unknown or an unknown unknown? But I'm just going to drop this over here. Y'all can check it out. I've got an interesting question here, actually from someone in the chat, and I feel like, Cheryl, you're going to really like this one, because it says many engineers don't like to tackle technical debts because it's not always considered in performance reviews. As it doesn't involve delivering new features, this can negatively impact the culture of maintaining good, up-to-date documentation, which ensures knowledge is accessible to everyone, from current and new engineers. Cheryl, is technical debt in your performance?
It's so funny, because I have you need to measure on Doors book, which is like the foundation of at least the OKR stuff at Betterworks. Absolutely. Michael makes a really great point that what you measure, right? And engineers are really good at this. No matter what you set as kind of measurement for performance, they are going to optimize for that. They're really good at figuring out how to do that. Especially some of the bigger companies that I've worked at where we had 250 teams, thousands of engineers. You have to be really thoughtful about anything like this, like any metric that you set, any kind of performance review criteria, because it can really sway the behavior, all right, of a massive amount of people and be really impactful. So that was something I think was a lesson learned for us at that time was, okay, we were all focused on measuring feature delivery and that as the, as optimal and not considering dealing with any kind of debt or anything else. And hence ended up with this pile that we had to then deal with. And so it did result in a shift in considering more of, maintaining tests. At that time too, we had, even though it was a legacy, we still had like 13 million tests running a day, like a ridiculous number of automated tests that I always was like, okay, how many of these are really serving a value or purpose, right? In and of themselves, because we would still release and still get a bunch of bugs. But anyway, it was, that's what happens, I think, when you just have this massive code base that we have thousands of engineers working on it in a frantic pace. It can get, the scale of it can get pretty wild from that experience. And just to kind of, to bring it back around, like any criteria you set within these larger organizations is absolutely going to sway behavior. And so you have to be really thoughtful about it. I think when you have a smaller organization, which I'm leading one of those right now, it's a little bit easier to kind of know where your debt is. Like right now, one of our engineers is flagged. We have this thing, it's new, it's newish, right? It's code base that's probably a couple of years old, but because we're moving really fast, there's already kind of some debt that we're amassing. The kind of debt, Douglas, that you were talking about, the good kind of debt, right? Where you're intentional and you're going, we're going to take a little bit of a loan here so that we can move fast, but we don't want to lose track that we need to go and pay this down. So that's the important part, is knowing, that you're making this conscious decision and we're all behind it for the time being, but we're going to have to pay this debt, so let's incorporate in the plan. So I know I did an early presentation when I joined for the product organization, for example, around understanding, it's important to add features, but if you just keep adding features onto your house, so say you add a bathroom and you add this and you add that, but then your foundation's crumbling, you're going to be in trouble, right? So making sure we're balancing kind of taking care of the technology is really, really important. I mean, one of the things that's so real about the environments we work in now, there's the code our teams write, but a massive amount of whatever you're delivering is code from other places.
Oh, yes. I feel like you and Josh could probably have a whole day about
a whole other,
like, where did this code come from?
So you have your own tech debt, but then you're inheriting that from these frameworks that you're adopting, and then those are going to version, but you have to take in those versions, right? So managing that is a whole other layer. Yeah, it's fun stuff.
I'm going to toss this in here just because I want to make sure we get time to talk about this, because I know you all three have opinions about this. AI, making tech debt better or making it worse? And I'm going to start with you, Josh, because I know like you have an opinion about this.
I got lots of opinions. They're not all worth listening to, but let's see what happens. For me, technical debt and even like coding in general is all about managing complexity. It's the reason why we do this. Like nobody actually wants a website. Nobody actually wants an e-commerce website, but it's so much better than having to go and knock on everyone's doors in a whole city to sell your product. So this technology allows you to manage a huge amount of complexity and abstract it into a form where you have now something that's more convenient. And that's, that's why we do this, is because we find an area of complexity within an organization, within the mission of a business, and we find an appropriate layer of abstraction in order to, to hide that complexity, in order to present something that is more convenient to use. And so the trouble comes when you are hiding complexity that you don't even realize is there. And that's one of the things that I think AI has amazing potential to provide convenience, but it also has to be treated with a lot of care, because it's very easy to hide complexity that you don't even know about. When you turn it's amazing at solving fuzzy problems, but when you turn everything into a fuzzy problem and then hide it, suddenly things start to get a bit fuzzy in places that you maybe don't want them to. So that's my feeling. I think, just like anything, it's an amazing tool that we can do a lot of good with, or a lot of shooting ourselves in the foot with.
Mm-hmm. All right. Would Douglas, you want to go next? What about AI? Is it our friend for technical debt, or is it our enemy, or a little bit of both?
Well, it's going to create a lot of technical debt, and I'm real happy about that. That's the brief version. Let me ask you. Do any of you play chess?
A little.
A little. Okay, good. I used to play chess really seriously. I used to be a tournament player and so on. Nowhere near the top level, but I played it seriously. And one thing I observed was the first computers that would play chess were in the city I was in. And so they would come and they'd play in the tournament. They were really bad. We could all beat them. Now your phone can beat the world champion, right? So computers in chess have become hugely, hugely better thanks to AI and other advances. But there's a very interesting phenomenon that happened in the chess world, is that in those tournaments, one thing people tried to do was they said, well, hey, we're going to try to get to see if a computer plus a human is any better. And they called it a centaur. Remember the old Greek half horse, half human? And those centaurs, when they would play in tournaments, they would beat people, but they would also beat computers, because the human would add this creative element and the computer would say, no, that creative element is a dumb idea. You're going to get killed in 20 moves. But then the human would say, oh, well, how about this? And the computer would say, that's okay. And that's what I keep telling my clients to do with AI, is make sure you have a human who is working with the machine very, very closely. Because then, yes, you're going to create lots and lots of technical debt. The whole point of having an AI tool, and we have this new thing that's coming around now called vibe coding, where you just kind of sit back, you tell the computer to do some stuff, and you just chill out. You drink a margarita, and you're busy coding, and you don't have to be a software developer to do it. My God, that creates a ton of technical debt, because the machine does all kinds of crazy stuff that doesn't make any sense. But if you then come along and control it and prune it and work with it, then you can get to something that actually you can show to your customers and get feedback on it, and then stabilize. The fancy old term for this is spike and stabilize. You get the code out there, you find out whether people actually want to buy it, and then you get the tests around it, then you tame it. Now, if you were doing that, that would be a wonderful way to incur quite a lot of debt, pay it down quite quickly, or just throw it out, right? Just absolve yourself of it and say, nobody wants to buy this. That's the way I'm telling my clients to use AI today.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like the lean startup, right? But, accelerate.
On steroids.
Yeah.
You don't have to hire a ton of engineers. You have a few. You don't have zero, but you have a few who then guide the bots in going and trying stuff. You can accelerate a lot.
This is interesting, because this is something I'm running into in my work as well, though, is like those few that you have to be very senior, right? Yes. I find that like in my work, I use AI all the time and I get all these great results out of it, but I'm using it as a person who has put in many, many hours of hand typing a lot of words, right? Like, so I can look at it and go, ew, or like, oh, that's not going to work the way they think it is. And I imagine you've got those very senior engineers. Like, that's what I want. It's like, I want that. I'd rather have one or two than have all that army in some ways. I don't know, Cheryl, what are you feeling about this? Like, is this matching like kind of how you're thinking about it, or what would you add?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we actually have a relatively lean team, and it skews very senior. And to Josh's earlier point, the actual writing of the code, right? It's like kind of the quote unquote easy part when you finally get to it. So much of the work is understanding the business requirements, understanding all of the options that we're going to need to provide for the multitude of our customers, right? Because everyone's going to run their processes differently. So it can get quite complex. So we do a lot of partnering with our customer facing folks and professional services and what have you to really unpack and understand and do that with these senior engineers, and their wheels are turning and thinking about, okay, how am I going to architect a solution that's going to work, right? And provide all the flexibility that we're going to need, et cetera, based on the inputs at hand. It's very intellectual work. And yes, we use AI as a partner all the time, right? Because you're always like, especially, for example, if you want to then take what's in your head and put it into a presentation that you can give to someone non-technical to like get their feedback, right? Really easy to do that with the help of AI. But you absolutely need that. I think the individual, that senior specialist responsible to kind of be in the middle of it. So when we think about AI, and introducing within our product, we always keep the human in the loop. I mean, we're in HR, we're building out HR processes, right? It's human resources still. So it's important to keep the human in the loop. The human has to be accountable. That manager has to be accountable for whatever is coming out, whether they got an AI assist or not. Really, really important. And then internally, as far as like, we're really big users of AI just across the board, but always in that kind of right now companion kind of modality. We got real early benefits from a test standpoint. So our ability to, get a solid solid set of test cases, solid, everything automated in a fraction of the time it used to take. AI is great at that. Really, really great at that. So we have less need for, our quality engineering kind of ratio has shifted because of that. Or many of our quality engineers are now moving into engineering roles. I helped make a lot of that happen when I was at Salesforce as well. We're just getting so much efficiency using AI. And then the lift on the engineering side, it really depends on the seniority of the person. I think the very senior people get maybe less of a lift from a productivity standpoint, but because they spend a lot of their time kind of architecting, right? And solving as opposed to writing code. But yeah, that's my take on all that.
All right. So I think as we're thinking about how to move forward with this, one of the things we talked about is how to use this as a lever for growth, how to think about it in a more positive way. We're talking about the impact that AI is having in this, what is your best piece of advice? Like, let's say all three of you are fairly senior. Like if somebody comes to you, a younger, engineering, like tech leader, and they say like, look, I'm stressing about this. I don't know how to think about this. Like, what's your most important piece of advice to them about how to best manage their technical debt?
Yeah, I think Douglas should go.
I'd be very happy to. I didn't want to step on anybody else.
No. I think all three of you are going to have great advice, but what you got?
I get that complaint all the time. And the first thing I tell them to do is stop complaining. Now, the problem with complaining is that it doesn't produce any results. And engineers love to complain about, I have this old code. I had a fantastic, he was in sales, but he had this tremendous insight that I've told everybody about ever since. He was the founder of the company. He'd hired a lot of engineers. He watched them work. And he said, every engineer that I've ever hired wants to rewrite every piece of code that they ever touch. And I said, yeah, exactly. Because they love to complain about what they have. And it's much easier to write code than it is to read it, especially if it's that legacy code that doesn't have the nice automated documentation, the automatic tests that we've been talking about. And so what I tell them first is you got to stop talking about it in this negative way, in this complaining way. And what they're often trying to do is kind of angle to get to work on code that they like better, i.e. code that they wrote. And engineers who are less experienced, if you've been around for 20 years and you have battle scars, you know this. But the ones with 5, 10, 15, they often don't know that that code is extremely valuable. It has high value because it's been through the war. It's been hit and bashed and changed and updated for all kinds of weird things along the way that your new code is not going to have. So I much rather that they did is that they were making changes to the code as they worked on it. And this goes back to your question, Mary Ellen, about how you measure and how you put it in the performance reviews and so on. I don't want any performance review metrics on tech debt, because that doesn't have value to the business. Like Josh was saying, nobody ever bought a website. Nobody ever bought a database. Nobody ever bought those things. They buy features and improvements and better revenue and less cost, right? They're buying from Cheryl better HR provision and so on. So what I want my engineers doing is making updates to the code that make their software more valuable and that their customers can see. And while they're doing that, they're making it more maintainable. They're making it more successful. That probably means paying down some tech debt while they do it. But I'm looking to them to make that kind of judgment. And if they're complaining about the tech debt, they're not going to get very far with me.
I was thinking the equivalent in marketing is every new CMO wants to rebuild the website too, which also intersects with why, because they want their messaging, but it's also in the code. You wind up building like people. It's true because you know what you built, you like it, but it also made me think of things like we were talking about legacy code. I often think about COBOL and how like COBOL is like still the foundation of so many really critical, secure applications that we all rely on to exist. And like, I don't hear very people very often try to propose getting rid of COBOL, like, because it's like, well, we don't actually understand how it works like entirely. It's like, we don't talk about, is that legacy code, Douglas? What do we call that? Like, I was like, we can't go to the ATM like with this language that nobody knows, hardly anybody knows anymore, but is like the foundation of like what we do.
The danger of those systems is, yes, they do underlie so many pieces of daily life for us, and ATMs and spaceships and airplanes and other things. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that they typically don't have tests. And so actually the best COBOL developers that I know are busy kind of putting tests around those ancient systems so that we can then work with them, so we can control them, so we can get them under test and make them easy to change. And when they do that, they're actually very successful. And again, guess what? You tend to switch to more modern languages and more modern frameworks because it's easier to hire for them. But you got to get it under control first.
Cheryl, what's your advice?
Yeah, it's always a little bit tricky, right? I think as we're talking, you can kind of, I'm hoping folks are seeing, and I'm sure they live with this anyway. There's a fair amount of complexity with what we do, right? Which is why none of it's really, there's no true easy answer. And I do think, some of the things we were talking about. So as an example, when I came into Betterworks, one of the first things I had to do was sort of evaluate, there was going to be an effort to, it's like, we're sort of rebuilding the plane as we're flying it, right? Sort of taking what we would call the legacy platform, although it does have tests, but the platform that was built for different inputs, and that we tried to morph to work for a new business goal, and finding that we're having to just take more drastic action to kind of like rewrite pieces of it. And that's a big undertaking. And I've been part of teams that have been faced with that many times in my career. And this decision of like, okay, what are the reasons that you might want to embark on something like this? So this, I would maybe talk about it as like tech debt with a capital T, mm-hmm. It's like building the new house. Like this, it's like, it's time, right? To just, build the new house as we go, whatever. I'm trying to stick to the metaphor because I think it's helpful. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to be able to, as a leader, really understand why, and if we're going to embark on something like this, that's kind of time consuming and takes quite a bit of resources. What are the reasons, right? So making sure it's not just, there are new engineers and they want to work in this other language, mm-hmm. That's not a good enough reason to embark on such a thing. Like it really has to be the needs of the business have changed such that the way this system was architected, just isn't going to scale, right? Something of that sort of, that gravity that would kind of push you in that direction. So yeah, I think, for me, it's, you just have to be able to kind of really look at this all eyes wide open as a leader and make the best call for the business, whether you're talking capital T, tech debt or small t tech debt. And I love this idea, and I definitely am going to borrow this from you, Douglas, around just reframing tech debt from a more positive angle, right? That you're making an intentional call to, for the sake of speed, sake of time to market, what have you, amass some amount of debt, but you don't want to brush it under the carpet, right? And then just pretend it doesn't exist. It has to exist somewhere. You have to be always looking at it, reviewing it, making conscious decisions to pay it down over time. And that I feel like needs to be just a part of the process for all teams. Whether you have, like we use Jira, right? So do we have a Jira board that's just dedicated to known debts that we're amassing, that intentionally that we know we're going to have to address? That's how I like to deal with small t tech debt. And that would be my advice, is to at least make sure you're making conscious decisions with eyes wide open and not sweeping it under the rug, Okay.
All right. I think I do have a question that came in. It looks like I was taking a look over on the LinkedIn channel where we're also broadcasting. And one of the questions that they came in, they asked, and then Josh, I'm going to come back. We can talk about your advice, but I want to throw this out to y'all. They asked, it feels like a lot of times tech debt is something that only the engineers care about, and getting other people, when you do feel like it's reached that point where it does need time, you need some space to work on it. Like what's your advice for getting the other parts of the business to understand why that's important? Assuming it is important, right? We were talking about people complaining. Like, let's assume that it really is, like, it's not just about the legs. Like, they really want to fix something. Like, it's really something that's important. How do you sell it? Cheryl, how do you go to the CFO and get that money? Like, Douglas, how do you tell them what to do? Josh, how do you get them to get the resources and the attention and the space to fix it?
I don't, but I don't know if any of the others want to go first.
Yeah.
Because I don't do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll
from my
go.
point, I was going to say, I feel like it needs to just be, it is a little bit inside baseball. It is a little bit of like within product and engineering. And typically, we know it exists. We know we need to address it. Otherwise, it might bite us in the future. Typically, there's not, where there's the negotiation is typically with the product managers who are going like, what are you spending time on? I want all the story points, dedicated to my new stuff. So a lot of it is helping to educate product managers. And I do think that when you have real life examples of, we had an example of this where it's like, we're trying to build something new and the team's working on it, but they keep getting pulled back because some of the other code that's already out in production is buggy and has issues, and they're getting support cases. And so they can never focus on the new stuff because they can't, and so the product manager can see that. They can see that, plan for it or not, you're going to pay. Mm-hmm. You're either going to pay in a way that's like planned and in the backlog, or you're going to pay in constant distractions with support escalations. So you choose, and I do think that's sort of like how it ends up manifesting in reality, is you're paying for it one way or another. And you just have to be able to articulate that. So again, like I said, when I first joined, because we did have a lot of bugs and issues and we had to spend a fair amount of time adding more tests, doing some stabilization so that we could innovate, right? And that was the story that I told to everyone. It was like, you see us getting distracted, right? Escalation, not good for customers, not good for us. So we got to pay down this debt and then we can innovate. And let's not amass so much debt in the future, Mm-hmm. That's typically how I go about it. But CFO generally isn't asking too much questions around that.
Yeah. What about you, Josh? How do you have those conversations?
Yeah,
the business.
I really love how this conversation has turned to one of language and framing, because I think that's such a key part of how we do it. There's a lot of magical thinking that goes on with computers and with engineering. And it's kind of like, if you've ever been a teenager with a credit card, it's kind of like that, suddenly you can just go and buy stuff and not think about it. Whereas if you had to get called into a booth with a intimidating looking person in a power suit and sign a form, before they give you the loan, then you're going to think a little bit more carefully about what you're doing with that money. So I think having those conversations early on is really important. And they should be really positive conversations as well. Like it takes a certain amount of fossil fuels to be able to create a solar panel. But once you've done that, then you've got something good. If you leave it too long, then those fossil fuels are going to be so expensive that you won't be able to make the solar panels. So it's it's really something that you want to get in early, start doing intentionally, eyes wide open, like you said, Cheryl, and saying, here's how we have this window of opportunity where we can convert debt into something worthwhile.
Cool. And then what's that advice? You got any other sort of parting words of advice for our young tech leader?
Yeah. Before I forget, Douglas, I love your definition of legacy code.
It's not mine. I think it's Michael Feathers, but I might be quoting wrong. Just look it up. That's the standard definition. I don't get credit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well,
I think you made it. You made
way,
it. Just put a spin on it. So.
Yeah. Either way, it's mine now.
Good.
And I'm gonna hold on to that one because that's something that is often treated subjectively as well, right? Like, ask a lot of developers, and legacy code is just anything that's more than 2 years old. Yeah.
Anything I didn't write. Yeah, it's not the definition. Don't let them get away with that.
Yeah. But thinking about technical debt and strategies around it, I have a teenager who's doing high school maths at the moment, so I'm doing a lot of maths too. And if you remember back to that time, you got to show you're working out. Don't jump straight to the answer, even if you think you know it, because in those intermediate steps, there's all of these assumptions going on. And unless you know what assumptions you're making, you have no way of knowing whether you've got to the right answer or not. But make those assumptions clear, bring them to the surface, and suddenly you have an excellent tool at your disposal to help you understand more about the problem that you're solving. So I think that's what goes on a lot in businesses as well. And Cheryl, you made a great point that those assumptions change from one year to the next as well. But if they've now been codified into something where those assumptions are no longer clear, well, who do we trust now? So I think that's one of the big things that we can do to make sure that we're taking on good debt is by really knowing our assumptions, making sure that they are brought to the surface. Especially when we're using AI, you want AI to show it's working out as it goes, because that allows you to ask the right questions and to challenge the hallucinations that will always come when you don't expect them. Hey, developers make hallucinations too,
Right.
Everyone's been that developer who's like super confident that they know the right answer and it's actually completely baseless. But so it's good to challenge our assumptions. And I think as well, when we start to see those signs of maybe we've taken on bad debt, that can be a really great learning opportunity, because when you see those signs, it can help you to ask the questions, right, which of our assumptions was maybe faulty or has changed since it was made? Because, if you've bought a house and somebody else, the previous owner did their own wiring, this happens a lot in Australia. If you know where to knock a hole in the wall to find that mess of tangled wires, now you've got the opportunity to, and sometimes it's a small window of opportunity before there's a fire. You've got the opportunity now to actually invest some time in not just hiding that complexity, but in resolving it. And then you can move from hidden complexity, which is great when you just need to get stuff done, move from that to simplified complexity, which is where you want to get to. And that's, we have some great tools as software engineers of how to do that. And it's a discipline. I would say as well that this is a way that like AI augmented coding can really help, because it's kind of like you get a coding partner who is extremely pedantic, and you would probably not like them if they were a human, but because it's a computer, they're very useful and they can help you be very methodical and disciplined in your approach. So yeah, I think that's what I would sum it up as. We want to resolve our complexities and not just hide them. But we also need to be very disciplined in that approach, and we can learn so much whenever we see these signs of technical debt about where to dig and where to find that unmanaged complexity.
All right. Well, awesome. We are at time. So I want to thank all three of you for joining us in all of our time zones for this. I think we were all in radically different locations here today. I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Cheryl, I think, are you out in the Bay Area today? Are you at home?
Yeah, San Francisco today.
Yeah. And then Douglas, where are you today working from?
I'm in England, near the Channel Tunnel. It's about 500 meters that way.
No, that's very cool. But yeah, and then we all know, Josh, you are awfully awake for this. So, but I just want to thank you, all three of you. We had some really great comments and questions, and we were able to get to those. I think we actually addressed them, pretty thoroughly. And this was just, I found this, I always love it when we do these, and I feel like I always walk away knowing a little bit more. Even I'm the person who asked the questions, and I've even spoken to y'all before. But this was enlightening. It's got me thinking about how this applies to some other aspects of business as well. And how to frame up some of those conversations. So thank you all. And we can all help if you want to chat with everybody. We can go to LinkedIn, everybody's LinkedIn profiles. I will leave Michael and Devin are dropping them in the chat, and let's all just stay in touch. We'll have an online, the on-demand version will be available later on, probably by tomorrow morning, usually later on today, but by tomorrow morning. And let us know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks,
thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
It was great meeting you all.